Welcome to the 2022 Enable Scotland Annual Conference. The theme of this conference is My Own Front Door. We are here today to build upon and discuss the opportunity we now have given the Scottish Government and COSLA's Coming Home implementation framework to give everyone with a learning disability in Scotland their own front door by 2024. What happens next? How do we make this happen? How should it work? These are the things we will explore today. We want everyone in Scotland to have the same opportunities my sister Nova has been given, to live in a home of their choice, in a community they choose, close to the people they love. We need you to work together today to help us make My Own Front Door a reality for everyone by 2024. It is so important that everyone with a learning disability gets the right to live in the home they choose, just like Nova has. As a family, we had to fight hard to make this a reality for our sister with the help of Enable Scotland. What do you like about having your own home?
Going for walks,
Yeah?
going shopping, making my own dinner by myself.
Wow.
Because I love this house.
Yeah. And what about your family?
They're nice to me.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah? Like spending time with them?
Yeah.
Today, you have the opportunity to learn about how the Scottish Government and COSLA want to make this a reality for every person who has a learning disability by March 2024. It will not be easy, my family know that. But my family, on behalf of Nova, ask you to come to the challenges ahead with solutions and a commitment to the human rights of people like Nova. If you use that as your North Star in today's discussions and over the coming months, you cannot go wrong. We are off for a cup of tea. Enjoy the afternoon and please make it count.
Welcome everyone, and thank you all for attending this year's Enable Scotland Conference, either online, as over 200 of you are, or right here in Glasgow's Royal Concert Hall. I wonder if we can have applause to prove to everyone online that we're here. I think after the last few years we've had, that's one of the loveliest sounds I've heard in a long time. So I'm really delighted to welcome you all together online or in person. This week is Scottish Learning Disability Week, which this year has the theme, We All Have Rights and Don't We Just? And today we're going to bring together a wide range of experts by experience, people like Nova and her family you've just heard from, decision makers, people working in health and social care, to all come together and hear their views on what more we can do to make all of those rights a reality for more people who have a learning disability in Scotland. So over the next 40 minutes, we're going to hear all of those different perspectives on why the steps we take in Scotland now on the path to an own front door for all people who have a learning disability are so important and so urgent. After this first session, we'll have a wee break, and then we'll move into in-person workshops here in the concert hall and online webinars for our online audience, where we'll focus together our attention on how to make the right to live independently and to be included in the community a reality for everyone. Finally, we'll all gather together again here in person and online for an interactive question and answer session where you will have the chance to put your views and your questions to a really interesting panel of people with lots of different perspectives on what needs to happen now to ensure everyone has the support they need to live in the community they choose, in the house they choose, close to the people they love. As we're going through the session today, if you're joining us online as we've become so accustomed to over the course of the last couple of years, Pop your thoughts and your comments into the chat box. We want to hear from you. And for those of you here at the concert hall, we've actually got old-fashioned pen and paper on your tables and pens. So please jot down your thoughts, your comments, your questions as we go. And what we're going to do at the end of the conference is we're going to round up all of those online thoughts, all of those in-person scribbles, and we'll produce a digital conference report that we will share with you later. So, well set. We all know what we're doing. With that all in hand, I'm now delighted to introduce to you my co-host for this afternoon's conference, Michael McEwan.
Hello. That's the first time I've got a round of applause, thanks. So my name's Michael. I'm a freelance journalist. I recently produced a report for Reporting Scotland on the legacy of Lennox Castle. I've been doing different wee bits for the BBC and STV over the years, and I'm delighted to be here. And I'm delighted to be the compere with the wonderful Jan today as well at my front door. So I am pleased to be here to give you great pleasure to introduce the first speaker of the day, because you're not going to put up with me all day. It's Grant Shearer, who is the CEO of Enable Group, who is the leadership and has been with Enable fighting for human rights for people with learning disabilities for many years. This is a real, for thousands of people across Scotland, a reality for, and also she is on the Fellowship of the Royal Society of Edinburgh. Claire is now also the Vice President of Inclusion Europe and plays a leading role in the work of Inclusion Europe to support people with a disability. And at the moment, sadly, that they're going, they need our help over in Ukraine. So please welcome, put your hands together for Claire.
So before I start the speech, I have to confess to being a bit of a fangirl of Michael. So I saw him today and I immediately went up to him and said, Michael, it's you. We haven't met in person, but I've seen all of his work. And he said, Teresa, I can't believe all of these people know who I am. I was saying, Michael, you're on the TV more than Jan Savage, and that takes quite a lot these days. So But on to more serious matters. Good afternoon, everybody. It is absolutely, hello. It is so lovely to see you in person and to be speaking at an in-person conference for the first time in almost 3 years. Can you believe that? Some of you haven't aged a bit. Some of you have. Howard, Elliot on the front row there, I'm not saying anything, but I'm absolutely delighted that you chose to spend your time with us this afternoon. And choice and control, for those who know me and who know Enable, know it's something that's very close to all of our hearts. So, choice and control over your life is a basic human right, and so is choosing where you want to live and who you want to live with. Now, a little bit about the law around this. Article 19 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Disabled Persons states that, and this is very important, persons with disabilities have the opportunity to choose their place of residence and where and with whom they live on an equal basis with others. So that sounds quite simple, doesn't it? Because most of us in this room are able to do that. Yet in Scotland and across Europe, this human right is being eroded time and time again. Now, you've heard a little bit from Michael and a little bit from Jan about the Scottish Government's Coming Home report. And we know there have been some difficulties and we know there have been some delays, and absolutely we know that COVID-19 has been a part of that. But that report identified some very important things. It identified, for example, that 705 adults with a learning disability were, and I hate this term, out of area. So they weren't living where they wanted to live. They weren't living where they choose to live. We actually think from our research and the brilliant work done by Jan and the team that that number is actually much higher and possibly over 1,000 as we sit here today in the Royal Concert Hall. 67 people who were living in hospital because there were no appropriate accommodation or support in their community. Almost a third had been in hospital for at least 5 years. So I want to just leave that with you. We've been through a pandemic for 2 years, which seems like an awful long time. If you double that and add a year onto it, can you imagine living in a hospital when you're ready to come home, you're ready to choose where and who you want to live with, and you are often locked up with no recourse to having your own human rights met? We also know that a quarter of those people have been living in a hospital for more than 10 years. We know that 40 adults with learning disabilities and autisms have actually been moved outside Scotland. And I'll just give you a quick quote from one of my heroes, Professor Nick Watson, Professor of Learning Disability Studies at Glasgow University. When I was in a meeting with Nick, someone said, "We don't really have a problem in Scotland, Nick. We don't really have ATUs anymore, and we've shut a lot of the hospitals down." And Nick's words stay with me forever. He said, "We absolutely do. We just outsource them to the rest of the UK." And I want to think about that in 2022. Beyond the human cost, we also know it's very expensive to keep people locked up in hospital. So what happens is people are denied their human rights, and it actually costs the government more money for people not to get the life they choose. We've been campaigning in Enable Scotland for that, and we know that every year we want to try and move people out of a hospital setting. My own front door. I've been CEO of Enable for just over 6 years now, and I am very proud that Enable Scotland has led on many campaigns. And I know I say this every time, but none more than my own front door. Every year I think our campaigns get better and they get stronger and they have more impact. My own front door campaigns this year to shine a light on what is called, and what is rightly called, a human rights scandal. My own front door has had a huge impact. It has really raised the profile of human rights and the emergency that we're seeing here in Scotland that for too long has been hidden in plain sight. We need to thank our partners in the media for that, and for excellent journalists like Michael who have uncovered some of these stories and told them to the rest of the country. And Lucy, who will be joining us later, who will be talking about the campaign. And of course the families. Enable Scotland was established by 5 families, and we've gotten a little bit bigger in the past 65 years, there's no doubt about that, but absolutely we are still run by, governed by, led by our members, people with learning disabilities and their families. And I just want to take a couple of minutes to thank a couple of those who couldn't be with us today. And, you know, as I said earlier, none of us are getting any younger, but people like Harry Robertson, Bill Learmouth, who've been with us for decades supporting us. Other families who I think some might be in the room today, Beth Morrison, Jacqueline Foy, these families who keep our organisation alive and who keep human rights, and I see Beth in the corner there, hi Beth, who keep human rights at the heart of everything we do, in the charity that campaigns for people's rights, in our health and social care services, and in our employability and training services. So the one thread that runs through all of that, human rights, choice and control. In February, the Scottish Government and COSLA published their Coming Home Implementation Report, and I'm delighted that the Minister for Mental Wellbeing and Social Care, Kevin Stewart, will talk about this in the conference in a few moments. There is no doubt that this is a positive development, thanks to a number of people, but I would like to thank personally my colleague Jan Savage for her role in the group. As often the case, sometimes Jan's the only woman in a room full of other men, and that's not a criticism of men. I see Charlie McMillan in the corner there. But I think it's this, she tirelessly stands up time and time again to support the rights of people with learning disabilities, often in the most difficult situations. So, we have a timeline, we know there has to be change, and all of us have a part to play in ensuring that we deliver on that, either as providers of health and social care, although I hate that term, as commissioners, and again not the best term, and most importantly as campaigners, holding the system to account. Quite simply, we have to act now. In Enable Scotland, we have a phrase that you will all hear often. I know people like Heather and Lucy who work with us. We demonstrate by doing. And what does that mean? It means that we actually take an idea and we make it happen. And that's what we've done with My Own Front Door. And I do have to take some time to thank Scottish Government, because despite the fact of the difficulties we've had with COVID, I have to say their support of Jan, their support of Enable and their support of other providers in turning the rhetoric into the reality has and will continue to grow, and we're very confident about that, but we need you to help us with it. At Enable, we've demonstrated through our human rights services and through our PA model that we can actually work closely with people and with NHS partners and with local authorities and with housing providers. So all of the things we need for people to choose the life they live. And with that, we want to successfully move people on to be discharged from hospital and inappropriate settings. With the right support, anyone can live in the community that they choose, in any house that they choose. There's a number of experiences we've had recently. A young man in his 30s who had multiple community breakdowns, another technical term which just means he wasn't being properly supported or cared for. And when someone isn't properly supported or cared for, they quite often end up back in residential settings. So we have supported this young man. We have moved on to give him the life that he chooses, to bring him back from England and actually to give him a life in his own community with his own family. For 2.5 years he has lived in that local community in South Lanarkshire, close by where I'm from, and he is thriving. And often one of the happiest things about being CEO of Enable is I'll sometimes get some little photographs sent to me in my DMs. Now, I know we've probably got some lawyers in the room, and I'm thinking about Mary in particular, and I'm sure I'm not breaking any GDPR rules, Mary, or any privacy rules, but the best thing that ever happens to me is when Howard and his team send photographs of people just having an ordinary life. But it's people who didn't have an ordinary life before Enable Scotland and our partners supported them. So let's think about that young man, and let's think about the trips he now has to Anstruther and his fish and chips and living the life that he chooses, the simple things that we all take for granted. We have made this possible, we at Enable Scotland, in partnership with government, both local and national, with other providers, with SCLD, and with that whole system of people who help us. So I'm delighted, absolutely delighted that we can work with people now and to think about people not just like that young man, but also like Catherine, who is now settled in her own home in the West End of Glasgow. And she has joined us to share her experiences, and I am so happy. And I don't know if Catherine knows this, but I once saw her and one of her friends outside the house when I was with my children, and I looked across and I just saw this most amazing scene of people choosing where they wanted to go, directing their support and being very much in charge of their own lives. Now, I would never have interrupted that scene, but again, it's one of those moments where you don't really put things like that on Twitter, but actually that's the most important thing about being the chief exec. That's how you know you're getting the job done, and that's how you know you're getting it right for people. So, Catherine, we look forward to hearing from you. I'm now going to take just 1 minute of your time to introduce a phenomenal woman. Those of you who do follow me on social media will know I often talk about the difficulties of being a mum with 3 children and being a chief executive and how that doesn't always work out sometimes, but we try, and everyone at Enable tries their hardest. But I have the absolute privilege of meeting some amazing mums and mothers throughout my job, and one who I have, again, until recently only seen through television, had the honour to meet today. Kate, like me, is a mum of 3 children, and we have something else in common today. We both wore our conference shoes for the first time in probably about 3 years, so we were laughing. As difficult as life is and as complex as life is, we're all humans. We're all mums, dads, grandparents, aunties, uncles, nieces, cousins, and actually it's those shared things that we have together that make Enable Scotland so special, and some of the partnerships we have so special. So I want to tell you all about Louis, but Louis is not my son, so I want to hold you over to to Kate. We're going to hear from Catherine later. I just see you out of the corner of my eye. Thank you, Kate.
Mine are yellow. So it's lovely to be here today. It's great to see old friends and new friends. I've just met Catherine, and I'm Kate, but we both spell it with a C, so that's been lovely. And I'm really honoured, thank you for the introduction, I'm really honoured to be asked to come and talk today about the story of my beloved son Louis's life recently and his new front door. I've put up there, I'm being a bit ironic, that I've put up here, I wonder if my slides are going to show, that first slide would be lovely. That's the one, lovely. So that's a photograph of Louis, and I've said the dates. These don't define Louis. It says detained the 1st of January 2019, and he's now got a discharge date. I've only just been able to say that a few days ago. But Louis is so much more than that. You can see Louis is 5'11". He's a great walker. You can see how he loves me. You can see he's got an apple in his hand. We love to walk in the Ochils, which is close to his new front door. And Louis is a man of huge courage and resilience. So as a baby, Louis had a devastating illness, which had an impact on his life. But that's not Louis. I was just talking with John, a friend earlier. We're not defined by our disabilities. I've got plenty of disabilities. We're not defined by that. We're defined by our search for the truth and community and doing what's right for all of us in community. So that's a picture of Louis. But that was a picture of Louis, and that sort of sums up some of the background to this 3.5 years detention in hospital. Louis was living really happily in the south side in Glasgow, in St Andrew's Drive, and he had a peer group, he had supporters who were looking after him, and he came home at weekends. And his profound and complex disabilities were being met, but into that description, yes, there's some things that are due to that childhood infection, but actually a large portion of Louis's impairments are the coping strategies that he's learned. I've got some of those, a cup of coffee, glass of whiskey in the evening. Some of Louis's, maybe 2. But some of Louis's coping strategies are the things that other people use a horrible phrase for, challenging behaviour. So where you lash out or you tear stuff up. The other day, I was going to drive Louis back to hospital, and I put him in the back of the car, where he sits to go back, with a plastic bag that had some grapes in. So he ate the grapes, and then I knew what was coming. Plastic bag got ripped up. If I was going back to hospital, well, I'm not allowed to drink whiskey as I drive back to hospital. We know that. But that's his coping strategy. And the trouble was that when this his other home, when that was going to close, there wasn't anywhere in Scotland. And the social worker and I, we went and looked and we did this. And at that point, a little seed was planted in my head. But we have to put that on one side. Because Louis got sent 250 miles away. He went from living in Glasgow, and I can't do the accent, I was born in Singapore. But we know that in Scotland, in Glasgow, there's a certain voice. Anybody here got that voice? And he got taken away to Hartlepool. And they don't say mum, they say ma'am. Well, that's strange. But worse than that, Louis was giving up everything that was familiar. He'd left St Andrew's Drive, the swimming pool down the road in the Gorbals, Sandra in the cafe, left all that behind, and the people he knew and trusted, and the people who understand his language. Because if Louis met you, he'd probably say, I brought him up well, he'd say, ow, ooh, ooh, ooh. Or he might say to you, ooh, swimming pool. Or he might say, macaroni cheese, yes. So and this was so traumatic for me, I drove him 250 miles away and left him with people who didn't know him at all. And I spent the first 4 or 5 days there in a B&B and tried to give them a crash course in talking Louis. I'll test you all later. The staff felt helpless. Nice people have gone into care jobs feeling helpless. Louis feeling helpless. There were some nice times as well. There were some nice times. But all of that was then repeated when Louis was brought back to Scotland, basically on an economic basis by the commissioners, again to people who didn't know him, who couldn't understand him. So, of course, what happens there is lots and lots of medication. And then he got detained on the 1st of January 2019. But underneath all that, do you remember my little seed that I planted? I'll come back to the but. But my little seed was I'd had a vision that because I'd pursued a medical negligence case for 19 years, I am dogged, we had achieved an out-of-court settlement on the day of the trial. So I knew I could apply to the court to use funds that are held there for Louis to have a house bought for him. That's quite unusual, but there's loads of funds in housing. So other parents, if they were encouraged, would be able to make that kind of vision as well. My vision was this homely home for Louis. Next slide, please. A homely home for Louis for the long term, where an intentional community could grow around him. So I'm the core of the intentional community, but I won't be here forever. And I've got to plan that. I've got to create a community of Louis speakers, people who understand Louis' story, and to surround Louis and his care team, who I care for, with all of my social networks. And today, some of you have been saying you'll come and visit us. And I hope at the end, perhaps some of you will promise we're just a few miles north of Octorada. So it'd be lovely to make that community. Next slide, please. And thinking on an assets basis, and I've learnt to do this because I've been to the right meetings and read the right books, starting though with faith. So I stood, this may seem strange to some people, but please just go with me. I stood in front of the altar in our local parish church, and there's a picture of the wounded Christ, and I said, help, you're wounded, we're wounded. I can't do this alone. I'm really going to need some help here. And the question that then sort of came to my head is, well, who is Louis? I'd say also in these assets, I'm motivated by love. There's nothing worse than seeing your beloved child so traumatized by poor care, by difficult circumstances. And I am the deputy to the court, and I could do that. And years ago, because I'd written a book and I met a man, I got invited to be part of something called the School for Social Entrepreneurs. So I went up to London for 8 weeks over a year, and it was a sort of management course for people in the voluntary sector. So I got the confidence and the skills to know I could create a charity or a set-up. And also to say, the Scottish Government policies, Keys to Life and all the things, and kind of looking at human rights, and because another set of parents had done something a bit similar, the local authority were willing to work with me. Next slide, please. I want to go back to that key question. Who is Louis? Stood there, help, what am I going to do? Well, actually, Louis is a bloke who did the kilt walk twice, shook Tom Hunter's hand at the end. Louis is an outdoor man. Louis is creative. Louis loves to paint round and round, beautiful circles. Louis loves his family. Louis really responds. Sandra, in that cafe near the Gorbal swimming pool, well, they're bezies. Louis is really sociable. Next slide, please. So I knew that what we had to do, here's some stories. There's Louis in the swimming pool. There's Louis painting. We've got friends who've got ponies. We could borrow them. We lived in the country. Next slide, please. So I believed that by going to the court and putting this proposal, then I could see if I could make that come about. And what I thought was needed, and first of all, just to say, that photograph, that's two of my favourite men in the world. Louis on the right, wearing the turquoise blue sweatshirt, and his friend, my beloved godson, David, is at the other end of the table, and that's Louis and David having tea together a couple of weeks ago in Louis' new house. And on the back wall, you can see all those things for the calendar of what's happening. So it was obviously Wednesday and it was Mum coming for tea. But my vision was that we needed spacious accommodation, both indoors and outdoors, because Louis big, and sometimes with his regulation and, you know, pushing out and needing space, needing to be calm and tranquil, space was going to be helpful. We really needed a committed care team because Louis, I've already given you a crash course in Louis, you need to get to know Louis's language to support him. Because thinking back to COVID, how difficult that's been for all of us. But if you're trying to do that without language, even harder. So I'm seeking to support Louis and the care team. I want it to be close enough to home, but not too close, because what I don't want to happen is me to go into the co-op and then find Louis gone into the co-op when he was actually going to go swimming, because that would just be difficult. So Louis is 18 miles away, but it's still within my kind of social networks. It's also got the whole potential of the Ochils, so slightly different, so quite exciting for us as a family as well. And also to know that Louis, we all need purpose and meaning in our lives. And so often for somebody like Louis, there's not enough purpose and meaning. And so I wanted there to be enough scope for activities and meaningful purpose to happen. Next slide, please. And here is some of the reality of that journey from the vision to the reality. So I went and researched all the vision papers, all the strategy papers I could find. I was supported by PAMIS, had some terrific meetings with Scottish Government and with local authority. I took loads of paperwork. I got permission from the Court of Protection for the purchase of the building. And then I went searching for a property. And I think there's a good story that actually this started with a failure, because I knew of a walled garden with house that was going to be put on the market, and we didn't get it. But I'd done all the visioning around it, went through the disappointment, and then found somewhere and thought, oh, thank goodness we didn't get that one. And I think it was a really important bit. When I bought the house, that really demonstrated to the stakeholders that I meant it. So I've just made acknowledgement there of all the people who supported, and the other parents, lots of parents who told me their stories and how things had helped. And all through that time, I was supporting Louis in hospital, which is a 100-mile round trip. So I was going there and walking with Louis. For Louis, I've told you about the communication. We transformed his room. We painted big pictures, we went for walks, we brought back flowers, we totally decorated this room, cutouts from magazines, lots of food. So if Louis was wanting to talk to a nurse and to say, spaghetti bolognese, he could take her hand, pat the picture, and she would then go, oh, spaghetti bolognese. Now that was great, but you know what happened? A man came in, could have been a woman, but it was a man, wearing a suit. It said infection control. He said, all of that's got to come out. Well, that's the sort of stuff that systems do. This room was working so well, but it wasn't allowed. So there were problems within the hospital and the culture. And then lockdown happened. And that's a photo of Louis, who amazingly had taken to FaceTime like that. So we used to talk every day on FaceTime. But of course, it delayed the contract between the local authority and the care organisation. It delayed the building adaptations. Louis was traumatised because actually the situation in the ward got considerably worse. And then the recruitment for the care team, next slide please, started late in 2020. But we got the house, and I chose a house. It's only about 300 yards from the A9, so it's probably a bit cheaper than if it had been further away. But I knew that on a really snowy day, if somebody breaks a leg or there's a panic, actually you can always get onto the A9, it'll always be swept. But it was still sort of relatively in the countryside. And I can recognise now that this was part of my therapy, getting over the trauma, because for the first time as a parent, I was able to take some control of these things. And I'd just like to point out some of the things in those slides. I was able to give Louis choice and empowerment, because that top right-hand corner is a whole load of paint swatches. When I'd gone into hospital, it used to be grim in there, in a little room, no decorations. But we sat there that day and we had a big sheet of paper and all these colours. And I said, Louis, what colours would you like to choose for your house? So he picked these beautiful blues and greens. I don't know if you can see on the left-hand side, it's bright green. And then he slapped that down on the left-hand side and said, ooh. And you know that means swimming pool. So he wants all those beautiful colours, and he's got the idea he's going to have a paddling pool too. And you can see in the left-hand picture, what we were doing, we were sort of proofing the rooms, because just say Louis got all upset and he bangs the wall and it cracks the plaster, forever afterwards it leaves a really horrible reminder of, oh, the day when that wasn't a very good incident. So what we did, it's MDF board that's been routed to look like panelling, so the whole of the downstairs in Louis' room is covered in that. Next slide, please. And you can see that lovely, safe, enclosed courtyard. So then we've got the possibility here of what was going to happen. These were some of the challenges. Here's apple tree. I couldn't believe it. That day when I stood there and saw apple tree carved into the metal, it had actually become a reality. So it was recruiting and training the care support team, building relationships, adaptations to the property, establishing routines to come out of hospital. And then these are some of the kind of celebration things. Here's this beautiful room. Here's two of the carers together, a family round a table with Louis. And then Louis and one of his care team watering the plants, and two more pictures of Louis and his care team, all developing those routines. And lovely, ending up with, I think that shows the power of relationships. I love him. He loves me. But before I'm going to go, and I've had the warning, I know I'm going to go, there's Louis clasping his... Suddenly, out of nowhere, there we were aiming for about the middle of June. Suddenly, this rule came that said you can only have 200 days out of hospital when you're under a detention, otherwise you've got to go. And we said, oh, but we haven't got a care team. There are 3 members of the team who haven't even met Louis yet. So that was a bit of a nightmare. But in fact, we just managed to work it out, and Louis is going to come out on the 30th of May. And I'm going to have to go at the end of the 3 o'clock session because I'm going back there tonight. So I'll bring all of you back there tonight and tell Louis that you're part of his community, and I hope you might come and visit us. Thank you.
My goodness, how do you follow that? And I think the thing is, you can't follow a mum who speaks from her heart about her child in such an amazing way. So there are lots of people in the room today who that story will resonate with, and thank you for being so honest, and thank you for sharing Louis' life. And please, when you go back to Louis, thank him from me and from all of us who are here today, because we have grown and learned more just by hearing about Louis and his story. So thank you so much. Okay, so slightly different tact now in terms of what we're going to talk about. I have a couple of jobs, as well as being CEO of Enable and being mum to Ava, Patrick and Matthew, and I know which one is the hardest, but that's a different story. I'm also Vice President of Inclusion Europe, and that's quite important to people at Enable Scotland, because Enable Scotland was one of the organisations that founded Inclusion Europe quite some time ago. When I became Chief Executive, I wasn't really sure that we still had a place in Inclusion Europe, that we still had something to give. And I spoke to the team and said, we have to make a decision about this. This was an organisation that was founded in Greenock in 1988 and had always had close ties, but over the years those ties have moved. So I spent some time with our ACE members, and they've been participating in the Inclusion Europe Hear Our Voices events. And they have continued to work very closely with Inclusion Europe, and they very much gave me my orders as the Chief Exec and said, no, Teresa, this is important. We have to stay part of Inclusion Europe. Now, at that point, We didn't know about Brexit, but Brexit happened. So again, we had this conversation and we said to our members, okay, the UK is coming out of the European Union, but we are still European, we think, we feel, but this is your decision and what do you think? And our members very much said, we want to see part of Inclusion Europe. And the reason they want to see part of Inclusion Europe is because there are 1.4 million adults and children in Europe living in institutions. So just as Kate described, in locked up units, in hospitals, in institutions caring for hundreds upon hundreds of people in the one building. So Michael talked earlier about the closure of Lennox Castle, still living in those types of institutions that we've moved on in Scotland, thankfully. And in some countries in Europe, that has been particularly difficult, and that number has actually been increasing. And I'm not going to dance, but I mean, whoever's music that is, I like your choice. So we decided to stay. And little did we know when we decided to stay for that second time that this was the right thing to do, that there would be a war in Europe and that there would be a war in Ukraine, and that the people that we know and love and people that we've met and spent time with and our members have spent time with would actually be subject to that war and to the horrors of that war. So in a few minutes you'll be hearing directly from Inclusion Europe Director Milan Sveripa, who's joining us live from Brussels. Milan has been at Inclusion Europe since 2016, and he, previous to that, did some award-winning work with deinstitutionalisation and social care in Czechia. He's worked in a number of other countries. He's co-chaired the European Expert Group on the transition from institution to community living. And, of course, the gravest human rights violation in Europe this year, with the war against Ukraine from Russia, he has been at the forefront of supporting those families with learning disabilities who haven't been able to flee the country. So we have seen pictures of almost millions of people leaving their homes, leaving their communities to flee to the borders. And what we often don't see are the families of people with learning disabilities who are unable to leave the country, who have to stay there because their loved ones are unable to travel for a variety of different reasons linked to their disability. So we're going to hear directly today from one of those families, and I'm proud to say that we're going to hear from Reza, another member of Inclusion Europe. She's a parent, she's a co-founder of the Ukrainian Inclusion Europe movement, and she is here to talk about the impact of war on people with learning disabilities. But one of the things I would like to say to you, our members, two things. One, thank you for making the decision to keep us in Inclusion Europe, because we have done some really good work. We've done some great work as members of Inclusion Europe. But most importantly, the team at Enable Scotland supported Inclusion Europe with their fundraising campaign in the first week of the war. And in that first week, and subsequently, we have raised almost €500,000 to send directly to families with learning disabilities in Ukraine. Almost €500,000 to buy bread, to buy water, to buy medicine at times, and sometimes to buy safety. And so I want to thank you as our members for making that decision, and I want to warmly, warmly welcome Milan and Reza to the Enable Scotland European Conference from all of your friends here in Scotland. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Teresa. Good afternoon, everybody. I must admit I have to study myself a little bit after also seeing the flags of support in support of Ukraine. This has been a situation hitting closely my heart. So I'll try to gather the correct words here, but we'll get to that. Thank you very much for the nice introduction, for the opportunity to be here with you today and to participate in your conference and to learn more about the work that you are doing with Enable Scotland, and to also celebrate the successes of your work. Inclusion Europe is the European movement representing 20 million of people with learning disabilities and their families from 39 European countries. And as Teresa said, Enable Scotland is one of the founding members of Inclusion Europe, and it remains a strong, active member committed to improving the rights and lives of people with learning disabilities in Europe. As an example, Enable has recently contributed and supported our self-advocacy conference Zero Voices, at which hundreds of self-advocates in many different countries spoke about issues that are dear to them, that matter to their lives, and expressed their opinions about how Europe should be providing the right support and establishing the right frameworks for to ensure that they can enjoy the rights similar to everybody else. Various colleagues across Enable Scotland, of course, contribute to our work, and that includes Teresa, as she just also mentioned. She was recently elected as a vice president of Inclusion Europe, and she has a big part in helping us do the work and develop the work, navigate the crises that people with learning disabilities and their families face. We had recently COVID, now it is the war in Ukraine, and also to fight for the rights that they need to enjoy on equal basis with others. I'm slightly on a slightly happier note. We've just had one success of our own here in the European Union. Yesterday, the European Parliament proposed change to electoral laws that would ensure that people with who are under guardianship, who have limitations to their legal capacity, would be allowed to vote. There's still more than half of the EU member states that prevent people from voting. This has been a large part of our work, big part of our campaigning as Inclusion Europe and other European disability organizations. And this is a fresh news that hopefully the individual countries in the EU will follow up. Another element, of course, that we've been working on is the topic that is close to the focus of your conference and the campaign, My Own Front Door. It is about ending segregation of people with learning disabilities. Ending segregation is at the heart of Inclusion Europe advocacy and at the heart of all our work. People with learning disabilities remain segregated in care institutions across Europe. They remain they remain to have to go to special schools out of their home area. Most of them barely ever find a proper job. And in cases, even when there is the institutionalization and people are supported to move from an institution to community living, people with learning disabilities, and especially those with complex support needs, remain segregated and left out of these deinstitutionalization efforts. So campaigns across Europe, such as My Own Front Door, are very important and are all part of this work to end segregation across Europe. It's the people with learning disabilities and the families themselves who drive, inform, and motivate our work. And it's the same in the case of supporting our friends and colleagues in Ukraine. Ever since the Russian war started, we have been working closely with the VGO coalition to tell the world about what is happening to them, what are the conditions they have to live in because of the war. To tell the world about the destruction of daily life, the danger to their lives, of the needs that they have, and how the world needs to help them. Together with the VGO Coalition and our members and other organizations, we brought these messages to CNN, the New York Times, and also to BBC Radio Scotland, because here as well, Enable Scotland has been very active and instrumental in advocacy and also in fundraising. Our European fundraiser has generated almost €500,000 since the start of the war, thanks to large part also to contributions from the United Kingdom, where Enable Scotland team was leading the fundraising efforts across the UK. This money is already making a huge difference to people with learning disabilities and their families who cannot leave Ukraine. But I think Raisa herself will be much better placed to talk about this and to talk about what they still need. Thank you, Enable Scotland, for all your contributions to European inclusion movement.
I think a hugely powerful statement there from Milan, and so great to hear directly from Europe. Raisa had hoped to be joining us live from Ukraine. I understand that her internet connection is causing some difficulties, so we're going to keep working with Raisa over the course of the afternoon to see if we can get in contact with her. But I think, Raisa, it's safe to say that our thoughts and hearts are with you, and I see Enable members in the audience just now. Perhaps the camera can go and have a look with that support for Ukraine flag. So we're absolutely with you, and hopefully we'll speak with you soon. I think overall a really sobering reminder that the path to my own front door across Europe, not so far from us here in Scotland, is really frighteningly long. And I think it's an important opportune moment now to remember that the path to my own front door here in Scotland, certainly over the course of the last few years, has taken a few steps closer to becoming a lot shorter. And with that in mind, I'm now privileged to introduce our next speaker this afternoon, which is the Minister for Mental Health and Social Care. The Minister is Kevin Stewart, and he wouldn't mind me calling him Kevin, and he's been to meet with members of Enable Scotland many times. Kevin is the MSP for Aberdeen Central, and he was previously the Minister for Local Government, Housing and Planning. Enable members, as have many people with learning disabilities in Scotland, have had the privilege of speaking regularly with the Minister about the priority on the Coming Home report, and I'm really privileged and proud and interested now to introduce the Minister to you and hear a bit more from him about the vision of the Scottish Government in COSLA to secure the human rights of all people with learning disabilities to live in their own homes and in their own communities over the course of the next 24 months. So over to you, Minister.
Hello, I'm pleased to be speaking to you today as part of Enable's conference during Learning Disabilities Week 2022. Enable Scotland continues to do important work championing the rights of people with learning disabilities living across Scotland. The programme of events today offers an important opportunity for us to come together to discuss how we ensure we are upholding the human rights of people with learning disabilities. I think it's really important to highlight my and the Scottish Government's position on supporting people with learning disabilities facing delayed discharges and out-of-area placements. It is completely unacceptable that people with learning disabilities and more complex needs spend any longer in hospital than medically necessary. I know that for every day spent in hospital, that person loses part of their connection with their community, their family and their friends. Everyone has the right to a home and an independent life. Enable have been working with the Scottish Government and COSLA on the issues around delayed discharge and out-of-area placements for a number of years. And I'm grateful that Enable have been sitting on our Keys to Life Learning Disability Strategy Group and have been working with us since before the publication of the original Coming Home report in 2018. Enable were also members of the working group set up in 2020 to consider next steps on this issue. The work of that group has resulted in the publication of the Coming Home implementation report, and I welcome the opportunities on the agenda today to discuss this report. It sets out a clear vision that by March 2024, out-of-area residential placements and inappropriate hospital stays should be greatly reduced. Ultimately, we want to be in a position where out-of-area residential placements are only made through individual or family choices and people are only in hospital for as long as they require assessment and treatment. I want to be clear that I will ensure the recommendations within this report are taken forward at speed. The report highlighted that one of the priority areas should be around about visibility and accountability. And I want to ensure that people are visible and we use high quality data to drive person-centred responses. In order to achieve that, the Scottish Government will work with experts, including individuals with lived experience, clinicians, social workers, commissioners and providers to develop and establish a national register to highlight to local and national government those individuals who need dedicated and focused attention to ensure they are receiving support which works for them. The register will both improve monitoring at a local and at national level and support local areas to effectively measure their own progress on reducing delayed discharges and out-of-area placements. I want Scotland to lead the way on providing suitable and appropriate care in the community for people with complex care needs. This is something that countries internationally have struggled to get right, and it's why conversations like today's are so important. I know that we can only get this right by working together closely and collaboratively. To further support swift and effective action, a national support panel will bring sector expertise together to provide an open, collaborative forum that can troubleshoot individual cases in partnership with local areas. The panel will assess progress against the register and identify those most at need of bespoke interventions, discussing cases directly with the staff involved to provide advice and support to progress action to return the individual home. Finally, a national peer support network will sit alongside this work to support local areas in planning and delivery of services for individuals with particularly complex care needs. This network will build upon best practice and allow space for innovative and bespoke solutions to be explored and created. Ever since I came into post as Minister for Mental Wellbeing and Social Care, I have been clear that listening to the voices of lived experience is critically important to all the work that we do in the Scottish Government. One example of this is when I set up the Social Covenant Steering Group to feed into the work of the new National Care Service. I have really valued the contributions of people with lived experience of learning disabilities on this group, and it is vitally important that we continue to work together as we move forward. While our work on the Coming Home Implementation Report is a high priority, it wouldn't be right to be talking about the human rights of people with learning disabilities without mentioning other work the Scottish Government has committed to do through this Parliament. Work continues on the Scottish Government's commitment to introduce a Learning Disability, Autism and Neurodiversity Bill. And that will strengthen and uphold the rights of people. And again, I hope I can count on Enable members to get involved in the consultation exercise we will be running over the next year to make sure that your voices and opinions are heard. I also want to highlight the work being led by my colleague Christina McKelvey, Minister for Equalities, around our commitment to bring a new human rights bill to Parliament. This bill will provide a new human rights framework for Scotland, incorporating as far as possible within devolved competence 4 UN human rights treaties into Scots law, including the International Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. I also want to take this opportunity to thank all the staff working across Enable. I couldn't be clearer about how important the work you're doing every day is to improving the lives of people across the whole of Scotland. I recognise and celebrate each of your individual commitment and dedication to Enable and to social care in Scotland. This applies especially to those working on the front line, delivering life-saving care and support, but I also want to acknowledge those working behind the scenes and the effort that they too are putting in to keep things going. I'm looking forward to hearing the feedback from today's discussions. I'm not expecting us to leave today's conference with all of the answers, but it will be helpful to work together so that we can develop our next steps. I look forward to continuing to work with Enable and its members. I've made it clear what I want us to achieve. What we need to do now is work together to achieve these ambitions. This conference is an important opportunity to do that. Thank you again for your time, and I really do hope that you enjoy today's conference. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Minister, for your contribution to our conference. Like many of you in the room and online, we are pleased to hear that the Scottish Government and COSLA is well behind people staying in their own houses in their own communities and end the hospital stay, because that's what we want as well at the end of the day. Okay, so I think we are going to go over now to my co-host, isn't here, she's disappeared. We're going to go over to Jan Savage now, because I think it's important to hear from as many people with lived experience in the room as possible today. So I will go away now, and I will pass it over to Jan, and she is. I'm delighted to Jan's going to be speaking to Catherine Bernert, who, alongside her family and the team here at Enable, has been working together to make her successful move from hospital into a lovely home, and Jan is with them now. So. If it was TV, I would say, over to you, Jan.
It's TV. It's TV. So Michael was giving me into trouble there for disappearing, but I absolutely have not. I have snuck away to the best table in the house, I think, if it's fair to say, Catherine. And with no offence to the Minister, because it was wonderful to hear from the Minister, I think this conversation, Catherine, is the one that I've been looking forward most to all day. So I'm joined here with Catherine and her family. We have Emma, we have Joyce and Karen, who leads her team at Enable Scotland. And I think, Catherine, we just want to have a wee chat about your life now. I know you spent some time in hospital, which was a safe place for you, but since working together with Enable and with your family and with health and with social work, you now live in your own house. So tell me a wee bit about where you live and what you like
Grey
about
Street.
it.
I live in Partick, Wales, can. The West End of Glasgow.
Very posh.
Very posh.
And what do you like to do in your house and around about your
I
house?
like to watch the soaps TV. Emmerdale and Cottage Street and EastEnders. I like to go to the park, go long walks, go to the gym. What else? I go to Golden Friendship Club on a Monday. What else? I go out to see Joyce and Emma on a Wednesday. And see my mum and dad on a Wednesday as well. Go to cinema, bowling, I go to...
All right, my goodness, I'm tired just listening to this, Catherine, I'm tired. So that's fantastic. And so being close to your family, to Joyce and Emma as well, is really, really important. And I think you told me earlier that you've got flatmates as well, which I thought was really... I used to have flatmates. And I think it can be quite good fun, can't it? As long as that's a choice you've made and you enjoy spending the time with the people you live with.
Donna Marie and Veronica looks after me.
Yeah.
I'll look after them as well.
I'm sure.
What else? I make sure they're okay and all right. I make Veronica a cup of tea sometimes in the kitchen. I make sometimes when I feel like it, I make her a cup of tea. Very often.
Yeah.
make me a cup of tea.
And I'm sure she makes you a cup of tea sometimes as well. So it sounds great, and you're all looking out for each other, and that's what flatmates are about, and that's what community's about. And I know that it's taken a lot of work, hasn't it, from a family's perspective, you know, to make this work. It means everybody has to work together, your family, your social work, Enable, and you right at the heart. That's really what human rights is all about, isn't it? And I guess from a family's perspective, what does it mean to you now to see Catherine in her own home with her flatmates?
Staff look after me as well.
Are you paying Catherine to say this?
For us, it's been really important for Catherine to live her life, to be supported to live that life. And when she comes on FaceTime and she tells us what she's been up to in a day, that's lovely, because the focus isn't then always about us. It's about Catherine and what she wants to do and her plans. And that, as I say, that's all we can ask for, that she keeps moving forward in that.
And that's always the most important thing. And sometimes that it's okay that can take a wee bit of time. I think that's important to say today, isn't it? That we know we're in a rush to make sure everyone gets access to their rights, but to get it right sometimes takes a wee bit of time, and that means working at the pace that's appropriate for all of you. Mm-hmm.
That's huge. It's to take your time to make sure that everything's in place and just communicating and supporting the move and the transition. And if it takes longer, then it has to take longer to get everything in place. Yeah. So is it when she goes in, when Catherine went into her house, then she's been supported to achieve in her home.
And we've heard, Catherine, from you about how much you love your staff, and we've got Karen here. Karen, from your perspective, you're a really important part of Catherine's life now and Catherine's flatmates. So what's made that work for you as a team?
I think I'm really proud of the ladies at Grey Street and obviously the team, because not only have they moved into their own home, they've done it in the middle of a pandemic. I read off script, I'm not good at this public speaking. But I think what has been really key to it is the communication between ourselves and the family. And if we're not getting something right, it's the family coming to us and saying it and letting us fix it. I think also Enable's really proud of their personal PA, and I think getting the team right for Catherine's been key, hasn't it? Yeah. We have had some changes in the team, but now we've got a team in place that's right for you, and you love being involved in that, don't you? What do you do when we're interviewing?
A Zoom call with the new support workers. Yep. It comes to
and you put them
the
through
service,
their paces, don't you?
Put them through their pace. Put them through their places, right for me.
That's it. That's a message for life. That deserves a round of applause. Suppose then, as a family, you know, you've heard today that we know this can work, and we're seeing that this can work. And Catherine, you're living your best life, and I think I need to come and hang about with you at the weekends and sort myself out. But what would your message be as a family to the people who can make this happen for other people? What would your message be today?
Well, keep moving it forward. Realise the importance of involving everybody and everybody working together to make sure it happens. And I think crucially for us over the years of what we have learned, the quality of care providers and the support staff that are involved, they need to be invested in the time and energy, because without them it doesn't work. That's who we need, because at the end of the day they're in day out supporting and making sure Catherine's wishes come true.
So, Catherine, it's a huge team effort. You are sparkly and wonderful, and I need to say on behalf of everybody at Enable Scotland, thank you so much, because I saw you at the Kilt Walk last week. I think there might be a picture of you up on the screen. Look at this. So a huge thank you for that. Thank you for joining us today, and I am definitely going to come and see you for one of those cups of tea, if that's all right with you, sometime in your lovely house. Lovely.
You're welcome to come to flat as well. You're welcome to come and get a cup of tea anytime.
I'm welcome to come for a cup of tea anytime. I'm going to take you up on that. So thank you very much, and I'm now going to hand back to Michael. Thanks, Catherine.
Okay, so if Jan's having a cup of tea, I'll have a cup of tea as well. Is that all right? 2 sugars and milk. So thank you to everyone who's contributed so far. It's been a wonderful event, and thanks for inviting me to do this. We have heard from, we've heard all about the Scottish Government's vision and heard from Catherine and a wonderful family about what it takes to make it work. We have also heard from Kate about how long it takes to remove the barriers so our son can stay in his own house, and that was very powerful, that speech, so thanks for that. And Jan's rejoined me up here, so I think it's time for the workshop.
It is time for the workshops, it absolutely is. So we're running a wee bit behind as we tend to do, but we've had so much wonderful stories to tell. I think that's okay. We're now going to ask you to move straight into workshops, where we're going to now talk a wee bit more about human rights and how we make sure that human rights, which really basically means your rights, will and preferences, are at the heart of every decision. That'll be workshop 1. Workshop 2, we're delighted to be joined from colleagues from the Scottish Government who are going to now talk about the next steps in the implementation framework, and you'll have a chance to talk that through. And workshop 3 is available only for people here in the concert hall, and that's an interactive chance to literally walk along a path to get to your own front door. So I look forward to that. Just a couple of bits of housekeeping about the workshops. There's going to be lots of people with lots of different experiences and lots of different perspectives as part of those workshops. If you have a personal issue or a concern that you would like some support with, Enable Scotland's team are here on hand to listen and to support you individually with that outside of the workshops. And with that in mind, to make sure that we have a space where we can all speak freely, the online webinars, they will be broadcast, but they're not going to be recorded today, so just to reassure you of that, okay? Please do put all your comments in the chat box as you go. We're going to capture those for the conference report. So our online audience in a few moments are going to be moved into your webinar groups. You don't need to do anything. You might have time to go and get a cup of tea if you're lucky. And it's milk and 2 for you, isn't it, Michael? Yeah, okay, excellent. Everyone here in the concert hall is now invited to move to the music room or to the path to my own front door as outlined in your packs. All workshops are going to start in just a few minutes, and we'll all be back here at 4:25 for our question and answer panel, so keep those questions coming. Thanks very much.
Imagine you lived in a hospital unit, far from anyone you knew, where you felt uncomfortable, unhappy, lost, unable to leave. Imagine you had been there for years, not because you were unwell or needed treatment, but because the support you needed to stay at home wasn't there.
I want to live in Scotland and with my family. I want my own food, my own stuff.
This is reality. This is Scotland in 2022. This is why your fellow citizens need your help. The Scottish Government's Coming Home report in 2018 laid bare this human rights emergency that is happening on our own doorstep. It found that 705 adults with a learning disability are out of area, meaning they do not live in their own community due to lack of available support. 109 people were identified as priority to return, meaning that they do not want to be where they've been placed. 67 people are living in hospital because no appropriate accommodation and support is available in their community. Of this group, 22% have been in hospital for more than 10 years and 9% between 5 and 10 years. 3 years on, we don't know if anyone has moved back. And worse, even more people might be in this situation now. Enable Scotland is asking you to help change this now. My Own Front Door is not just a campaign, but a movement for change. It aims to uphold the human rights of all adults who have a learning disability in Scotland to live in the home of their choice, in the community of their choice, close to the people they love by 2023. We are asking you to help raise the public profile of the situation your fellow citizens find themselves in by standing alongside them to make sure action is taken now to end this practice and restore their rights to live the life they choose as equal citizens. We want to aim this campaign at people in power who can make a real difference. And here are the 5 keys to unlocking My Own Front Door.
people who have a learning disability should be able to stay in their own community and get the support they need in their own home. The government should make sure that by 2023, no one in Scotland is sent outside of the country to get the support they need.
To people with a learning disability should be offered the chance to live in the community first. We know some people might not choose this, and this is their right, but no one should have it forced on them.
The government should spend money to make sure that organisations that provide support to people with a learning disability can come together and help make local support better everywhere in Scotland.
The government should record everyone, but this is happening to right now, and make sure to help them to live in the community of their choice by 2023.
The government should set up a panel so that someone is making sure that decisions are made about someone with a learning disability and where they live and are the right ones for them. People with a learning disability should be on this panel.
We cannot wait any longer, but we cannot act alone. We need you to act, to share, to speak up, and to get informed. People with learning disabilities are being subjected to a level of discrimination that we would not and do not expect other people in our society to bear. And the key to unlocking their own front door in every neighbourhood in Scotland is in your hands.
A hidden scandal. That's how a charity is describing the hundreds of Scots with learning disabilities and autism being forced to live far away from home. Enable Scotland say the practice of placing people out of their local area needs to come to an end, as everyone with a learning disability has a right to choose the community they live in. Suzanne Allen reports.
There we go then.
The simple act of making lunch is a big deal for Nova and her sister Sarah.
A scone, yeah. What flavour did you get?
Orange.
Chocolate orange, was it?
Nova is 44, has autism and learning disabilities, and has been in and out of different kinds of care her whole life, for a part of that in England. When the pandemic hit, she wanted to be back in Scotland with her family. She wanted to live independently with carers to support her, but the local council weren't offering that.
It's really stressful for us as a family. When Nova moved up from Liverpool, we had no placement for her here. We had to engage with the local authority here, which was a long and arduous process. So for that initial year, Nova was sofa surfing between myself, my mum and my sister. Every other option was gone through first, so from respite to shared living to even foster placements. Which
foster placement?
It's just not the right thing. For Nova has a loving, caring family. She doesn't need to be fostered into somebody else's family. Yeah.
Nova isn't the only person who has struggled to get the right care in the area they live in. It's called being out of area. It's when local authorities send people away to live, often miles from family, sometimes in care homes or hospitals, for years because they can't be accommodated nearby. The charity Enable says everyone should have a choice where they want to live.
We've identified through the best available data over 1,000 people who have a learning disability in Scotland who have been sent out of area. And what that means is people who have not through choice been sent to a different part of the country, away from communities where they have roots and families and friends. That's not fair. It's worse than that. It's a human rights abuse.
Last year, the Scottish Government gave local authorities £20 million to help reduce out-of-area placements. So we asked the councils what they were planning to do or had done with the money. Of the 15 that replied, 3 were planning multi-bed units, 1 was making a video, and some of them were vague. We showed our findings to Enable, and they said although there's some good evidence of planning to bring people back, the multi-bed units were a bit of a worry, because it's like replacing one institution with another. In 2018, the Scottish Government found there were over 700 people living in an out-of-area placement. The following year, that was over 1,000. To date, no one knows what the current situation is or what's happened to these people.
In England, there's regular monitoring of how many people are out of area.
The Scottish Government and NHS Scotland need to routinely record and publish data on the numbers of autistic people and people with a learning disability being sent away from their communities so that we understand the scale of the problem. This is something that other parts of the UK routinely report on, so they can have a much better idea of the situation and what they can do to address it.
The Scottish Government say, "We acknowledge there are continuing challenges around people with learning disabilities and more complex care requirements who have spent an unacceptable amount of time in assessment and treatment units. Hospital is not a home." For Nova, it's a happy ending. She has her own house and is close to her family.
And now you've got a great life, haven't you? Yeah.
You got a new house.
I've got my own house back.
New one.
Yeah, and you've got your new house.
Suzanne Allen, reporting Scotland.
Okay, welcome back everyone. It's great to hear the buzz in the room, and I'm sure lots of chatter going on at home and across offices across the country too. I hope those of you who were able to join the workshops and the webinars have enjoyed the discussions, and actually just in person at least the chance to get to say hi to each other again in person. It's been fantastic. We're really grateful to those of you who have led our workshops and webinars for giving us your insights into these important human rights issues, and to all of you for giving us your views. So we are now moving into the final part of our afternoon, which is our question and answer session. And we're going to hear some thoughts from our expert panel here, and you have got the opportunity to ask your questions. So I'm really pleased that as people have been registering and over the workshops, you've been giving me notice of some of your questions in advance, and I've had some through online as well. So before we get into the questions, I'm just going to introduce the panel, if that's okay. So we're once again joined by our Chief Executive, Teresa Shearer, and by Tom Kelly of East Renfrewshire Health and Social Care Partnership. Tom is the Head of Adult Services, Learning Disability, Mental Health and Recovery. We were due to be joined by Lucy Adams, as we said earlier, from BBC Scotland. Unfortunately, Lucy is unwell today and she's had to send her apologies. But her colleague, Michael, has kindly stepped in. So Michael has worked with Lucy on BBC documentaries in the past, so I'm sure you'll be an able alternative, Michael. Charlie McMillan, known to many of you, is the Chief Executive of the Scottish Commission on Learning Disability. Charlie, you've been there since 2019. Prior to that, was working at Capability Scotland, and now you're leading that great work at SCLD to promote the human rights of all people with learning disabilities. And finally, I'd like to introduce you to Manish Joshi. So Manish is Chief Executive of Strathclyde University Students Association, where he works with those students there to uphold the human rights of 24,000 students. So not an easy task, but Manish has been doing some really important work with Enable Group as a strategic partnership advisor on diversity, equity and inclusion. So a really diverse and interesting panel, I hope you'll agree. And I think with no further ado, we'll now get into the questions. So, first question is here in the room, and I have noticed that that's from Ivan Cohen. So, Ivan, if I can get the microphone to you, if you can ask your question, and then I'll direct that to the panel.
Right. Good afternoon, panel. Brave panel. Hi, I'm the convener of Enable Scotland's Scottish Council. Obviously, Teresa knows that. We have elections taking place to the Scottish Council next year, and we really want to make sure we represent the population of Scotland more than we do right now. We heard earlier from Inclusion Europe about the situation across Europe, but I'm worried that we are missing the voices of people here in Scotland from ethnically diverse communities. Why do you think this is? And how can we make sure those voices are heard too?
Thank you, Ivan. Great question. So I think we'll come to Teresa first on this and then probably Manish. So Teresa.
So I don't think Ivan has ever asked me an easy question in the 6 years I've been Chief Executive, so today should be no different, Ivan, thank you. Ivan, I don't know, to your last point, why is this? Why do we not have a more ethnically diverse community in our Enable community? Enable Scotland is one of the most progressive, inclusive, values-driven, purpose-driven organisations I have ever come across. And bear in mind my previous life, Ivan, I worked with literally hundreds of different organisations on the recruitment practices, on ED&I, and actually I think Enable could stand up against any of them. But for some reason, and if you look around the hall today, and it's not an easy thing to say, we seem to struggle not with gender diversity, not with age diversity, but we definitely seem to struggle with ethnic diversity as an organisation. And I think COVID probably really brought that to the fore. So when we saw that lots of people from ethnically diverse backgrounds were dying of COVID in greater numbers, it really became apparent to the team and I, this is an opportunity to do something about it and to actually improve what is a great organisation and make it better. But sometimes as Chief Executive, you have to understand that you don't have all the answers, you know, and this was one where I don't have all the answers and the team don't have all the answers. So we went to a couple of people who did, and hopefully I've got one of them on my left here. So we went out and we looked at a couple of people who knew what they were talking about in this field, and I was really proud to know Manish from some other work I'd done with SCVO and work in anti-racism. And so we set out our stall and said we are going to be an anti-racist organisation. Not we're going to be inclusive, because we are that. Not that we're going to be focused on equity, because we do that. But we're going to do it really intentionally, and we're going to ensure that we include more people from more ethnically diverse backgrounds who want to be involved with Enable, because why wouldn't you want to be involved with us? I think what we do is great. So a couple of things I think will help by the time we get to the ACE elections next year. Manish is doing a whole host of work right across the organisation. We have been supported by a couple of funders, and I should really call out Barclays here, so Barclays have helped with that. And we've also got a brilliant organisation run by two people who've come from Uganda with a really difficult backstory to this country and experienced how difficult it is to be represented in many of our public institutions. They run an organisation called Radiant and Brighter, so you can Google them and you'll see what they do. So I think by taking an approach across the whole organisation, we're really starting to move this up our agenda. And we talk about it all the time. We don't stop talking about it. But I will stop talking about it, and I'll ask Manish what you think about that. So we're working hard, Ivan, but we need some people to help us, would be my answer.
No.
I love that idea, Sadie, and Manish had the same idea, so we're on it, but that is great. And we need our no, it's great, Sadie. We need our members.
You stole my thunder, Sadie. But, that's me done. That's me done. That's me done. But no, not at all. And you know, I think that's absolutely spot on. And you know, I think Teresa is committed to this work, and I think we've been talking about this for quite some time. And I think what's really important is that Enable is looking to walk the talk. So it's about actions as well as words. We've heard loads of rhetoric over the last few years around Black Lives Matter, around building more ethnically diverse organisations. And it's really hard work, because actually that's why we're not seeing the changes in organisations. We're not seeing the changes in the boardroom and in other places that we need to do it.
We died more often because of COVID, more of us, because we're disabled. But what about the poor people that were having to be coloured and people were getting a lot more than
No, absolutely. And I don't think we can ever underestimate the intersectionality that comes with these things. So it's not about putting anyone in a box. It's not about saying, all right, this is just for you because you're a person of colour or you're from an ethnically diverse background. People's identities are intersectional. All our identities are intersectional. We all come from a variety of backgrounds. And I think when we talk about diversity, we're talking about diversity of experience, diversity of thought, social background, socio-economic background, as well as, you know, have we got people of colour in the room? Have we got ethnically diverse people and voices in the room? And I think some of the work we're looking to do is about going deeper in those communities. It's about building trust. So I can only speak as somebody who comes from a South Asian background. And in my community, traditionally, there's not a lot of trust with external bodies. We tend to look after our own. There's very much, you know, especially people who've been here, you know, certainly first generation, and I think as people become more established and more integrated into communities, you do start to see them building more trust and using more agencies. But I do think some of the work that we have to do is deep work of building relationship, building trust. And you know, that's where I'm really encouraged by my own front door campaign, because actually that's about keeping people in their communities. It's about keeping people connected to, you know, if you're from a Sikh background, a Gurudwara or the mosque, if you're a Muslim background, you know, and there are places and spaces. I live on the south side of Glasgow, and you know, we've got a really vibrant Asian community, but they wouldn't necessarily always know that they could come to Enable because they've got challenges, you know, within that community. So it's about building trust. It's about creating opportunities for us to actually go and talk to each other, to listen to those communities and hear what their needs are as well, and try and then build that into the work. And I think you've got some great tools here in terms of the campaigns that you've got. And the work that Barclays has recognised as well. I think that's really, you know, there wasn't many organisations that received that funding. So actually, I think it shows the commitment that's there. But I do need to also probably say, this isn't the work of 2 weeks of a campaign where we'll put some posters out there. It's a longer term thing. So translation, absolutely, it's one thing to do. I think making sure that digital assets and offline assets represent the communities we're talking about. We've got about 15% of communities across the central belt of Scotland come from ethnically diverse backgrounds. It's about how do we look at creating pathways for people, both in terms of within the organisation, but also in terms of the people that are supported, and moving along that continuum, I guess, because we won't sort it overnight, and it does take time.
Thank you. Thanks, panel.
Quite obviously disabled people, but put a mixture coloured and white people, so that they know they're welcome. Coloured and white disabled people on there.
It's a great point, Sadie. Everybody is welcome at Enable. We just have to let everybody know that.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Sadie. I hope that's answered your question, and some brilliant thought-provoking points actually for the panel to kick us off. I now have another question. So this is a bit like question time now on the TV, isn't it? And I think I've got Kirsty. Kirsty over here. You have a question, please, for the panel that I think let's hear it, and then I'll decide where we direct it. So over to you.
Hello, I'm Kirsty. I'm chair of Nationalites, right? My question is, what can you do to help the upcoming generation with disabilities and autism get their own house so they can be more independent and live a full and active life in society without being treated like third-class citizens?
So, powerful question, Kirsty, and I'm going to direct that to Charlie, please, from SCLD. Charlie.
To me. How do we do more about it? Kirsty, what a great question. First of all, I wanted to say thanks for having me today. It's just fabulous to be in a room with all these people. Really emotional experience, re-engaging with the community. How do you... Hi, Heather. I've just seen you there as well. So how do you... Listen, my job is all about trying to influence people. It's about working with people that build houses, that plan houses. And that's one of the big things that we'd stopped doing in Scotland, was thinking through the kind of different kinds of houses that folk need. They need all different shapes and sizes of houses, depending on their lives and their life experience. I think that discussions with housing planners are really, it can be a bit boring sometimes, Kirsty, I'm not going to kid you, but it's so important, because unless we build the houses, they're not going to be there, and it can take you 3 to 5 years to actually get from thinking, we could have accommodation for an individual or for a couple of people, but actually it takes you 3 to 5 years to get to the building stage and get the key in the door. I think that's also why the Scottish Government are absolutely committed with the Coming Home implementation plan and the register in inverted commas. That's about making sure that we're working with individuals, listening to them and their families and thinking, right, so this person really needs, maybe it's a 2-bedroom house, all on the ground floor with a lot of kit, because you know that the IT can make a big difference to somebody's living experience as well. That all needs to be planned and then built. So with the government's support, with housing planners' support, and then support of organisations like Enable, who are able then to provide the care and support that individuals might need in the houses, we can start moving forward to a different future. One more thing for me is a conversation with parents as well, and what's possible for people's lives. I think that sometimes parents are really, quite rightly, worried and concerned. And actually it's about saying, but folk can have great lives, and we have to work together, we have to plan it, we have to hear what they want, but they don't need to stay with you. There are different ways of doing this and planning for a different future. And we have to all come together and realise that different future for folk. Something I feel passionately about, Kirsten. I'm sure you do as well.
Thanks, Charlie. I wonder, Teresa. Thank you. And I know, Teresa, you feel passionate about that too. So
yeah, Kirsty, I think we work very hard at building relationships that enable and partnerships. But housing partnerships are something that we've really thought about a lot recently. So a couple of things. We've heard from Catherine today. Catherine's life is 100 times better because of a relationship with West of Scotland Housing Association. They have been outstanding. They have been so good to work with. We've been working with NHS, we've been working with HSCPs, but we worked really well with the Housing Association, and we had to do it to get it right for Catherine and her flatmates. A couple of people in Enable are involved on boards of housing associations, so some of the team here have gone out and got themselves onto boards so that they can be more connected. So Mary Galately, who I know you know, is chair of a housing association now, so we're all working really hard to make sure we've got better links. But I think the man to my left might have a small thing to say about that as well, because I think you've just had some good news, and I'm not sure if I'm meant to say this or not, so I will leave it to Manish to let you know if he wants to tell you.
Yeah.
You've got some good news.
Well, so I recently joined the board of Wheatley Housing, and Wheatley is one of the biggest social house builders, obviously, in Europe, and have a lot of work and experience and expertise in this area, but are also working in partnership with a number of providers, Scottish Government, Enable and others, I would imagine, right across the board in building housing, and have an ambitious programme for house building. And I think, you know, it is that partnership model that is so crucial to getting this right and actually trying to make sure that we're delivering for not just the current needs, but the future needs of the people of Scotland.
Yeah, so between Charlie and Manish, I think we're fine, Kirsty. We just keep working at it.
Thanks, Teresa.
Thanks, Teresa.
Brilliant. Thank you, panel, and thank you, Kirsty, again for a really insightful question. We're going to come to, I think, David Clark in the audience next, and whilst we just find David, just want to say hello to a couple of people who are watching online. So Russell Easton, you've sent us a comment to say hello. Sorry you can't be with us. We miss you, Russell, but you're enjoying the conference. And I've also had a message from Craig Steele. Craig, you're asking online about how do you access self-directed support and how do you get help to do that? I think it's fair to say that Enable Scotland can help you to do that, David, and we would do that through Lauren and her project that you would have met in the workshop earlier. So we'll be in contact with you directly to help you with any support you need to access your right to self-directed support. So I hope that's okay with you. Now to David. I think I can see you down in the front row, David, so if I can ask you to ask your question, please.
Hi there. I'm David Clark's PA. David lives in East Bartonshire with his parents, but he would love to have his own home. But when I say on his own, he means on his own, not necessarily sharing with anybody else. His mum's approached Eastern Bartonshire Council, and they've indicated that wouldn't be possible for him to live on his own. But is there any way David could take this forward?
Great question, thank you. So that brings it right back to people's human rights and working through the system to make that happen. Tom, I wonder if we could come to you in the first instance to talk through this one.
No problem. I had to kind of think about this a couple of times because it seems a wee bit the wrong way round. I think it kind of mentioned that you're still waiting on the social work assessment to happen. So decisions come after the social work assessment's happened, and I think what I would be doing is going back and saying that there needs to be a full assessment where your needs and your wishes and your aspirations for the future are included, and then any thinking in terms of future support and housing comes as a result of that. So, the two things don't kind of go together for me in terms of, you know, a decision being made before that assessment's actually happened. So, and it's really about being fully involved in that assessment process and then working out what's important for David, and then coming up with a plan from that. So I think I would be going back to the area and saying, well, let's do the assessment first, and let's see what that tells us, and then let's take it from David's perspective in terms of his support going forward, and take it from there. So.
David, if I can speak directly to you and to your mum, and hopefully she's online listening, we want you to think about our self-directed support service and how that can help. We have a brilliant team of people led by Gail in Enable Scotland who do just this work, and they are really good at working with the HSCPs and the local authorities and indeed housing associations. And sometimes when it's somebody more neutral, that can often help, Tom, just that kind of facility and get the conversation started. So please, your question is great, but the impact on your life is greater. So please talk to us at the end of today and we'll figure out how we can help you through our STS support team. That wasn't a plug for Enable. I find that really hard. I promise it wasn't, but we will be able to support you with that.
And I think it's fair to say, to go back to the Health and Social Care Partnership and just make that point about, you know, a proper assessment being done and taking it from there with the support of perhaps another organisation to do that. But.
Okay. Thank you. And some good practical advice there, but raising a really important point. Okay, next we're going to come to Lisa Kerr. Lisa, we'll just get a microphone to you. If you could ask your question to the panel, and then I'll direct that for you.
My question is that we've had connections with Ian Hamilton through the BBC, and it's just to expand it. And is there a way that the media could work with people with a learning disability to raise awareness through documentaries and other programmes, articles and stories? And I know that CBBC and CBeebies have started doing that, but it's just to find a way of expanding.
Thank you, Lisa. So I think the obvious person to come to in the panel here is my co-host, Michael. Michael, what are your thoughts on the point Lisa's raised?
I think, first of all, we need to get more people on camera and behind the camera. I think there's only about 20% in the whole of the UK with a disability in front and behind the camera on the media. But yes, thanks for your question, Lisa. The report I did for Lennox Castle was only scratching the surface. What I wanted to do with that report was to highlight the issue. Obviously, when I'm speaking to everyone in here, I'm speaking to the converted about it, but I wanted to highlight it to the non-converted people, if you get what I mean, that the one that's not been, you know, like surrounded by people with disabilities and their family, to say, you know, it's a human rights kind of like issue. And all that, you know, but we do need to highlight this more often in the kind of media. It's all like having it once in the blue moon, Lisa, on the TV or in the newspapers or whatever. But we just need to hammer it home, and with this campaign, hopefully it kind of like helps it, and hopefully one day. But it's all about raising awareness in terms of going into schools or doing it in front of TV cameras or whatever, you know. And I think it's more powerful as well when you see a person with a disability delivering that report. And no offence to my colleagues up at the BBC, Lucy Aggins and people like that, but when you see two people with a disability speaking on that report, I don't know how it looks to you all, but I think it looks more powerful and more powerful to the audience as well. Hopefully that answers your question, Lisa.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael. And I think you'll always have some... You'll always have some willing participants to interview, I'm quite sure, from Enable Scotland's membership moving forward, and that's not a plug either, Teresa. I think we're fast approaching the end of our session. Just a few more lovely comments coming through from staff members of Enable who have started working with the organisation over the course of the pandemic, and I think just reflecting on this opportunity to have everyone here together today and to meet the team and to meet friends of Enable, and just saying what a wonderful opportunity it is to reflect on the values of the organisation. So in particular that came from Loretta, who works for Enable Works, so thank you very much for the good review, and we'll look forward to meeting you in person soon. Final question then of the afternoon. It's a big question, and so it deserves a few minutes of our time. It's Edward Haggarty. So Edward, where are you? Edward, you're from our ACE youth group in Arbroath, yeah? And you have a question for the panel. So if you ask your question, and then I'll direct that into the panel. Thanks, Edward.
Hello. I'm wondering what the SCLD and the charitable view is around how long will it take the government to improve the framework after the community housing report and was completed, and also I thought on the involvement of people with learning disabilities in the correct of the framework.
So big question, Charlie, there, and I've just picked up, so looking for your views on how long it took to produce the Coming Home implementation framework, and any thoughts around the involvement of people with learning disabilities in the process. I'll come to you first, Charlie, as that was directed by Edward to you.
No problem. Listen, fantastic question, and part of the challenge in my job and in your lives is the length of time that everything seems to take. Honestly, things can go on and on. What happened with the working group that was set up was we were just learning how to work together in the pandemic as well. So that was part of the challenge for us, because it was set up in June 1920. That says a lot about how old I'm feeling. 2020. It didn't take us that long, honestly. It felt like that, Tom, exactly.
Can you cut that bit out?
Cut that bit out, yeah. Please. So we started working on the framework and the thinking behind it in 2020. And there weren't a lot of people with learning disabilities directly involved in that work, because at that point we were really struggling to get people involved in Zoom meetings and team meetings. There was a whole thing had to happen about actually providing people with technology, teaching them how to use Zoom and all of those things. So really it was about people like myself and Tom, Kate Sainsbury. I don't know if Kate's still here. Kate was involved in the group. I would speak to people like Beth Morrison, Kate Sanger, Kate Sainsbury, you know, Callum, Lauren, Graham, people that I was in contact with, and then I would feed their views into the work of the group. It's not perfect by any manner of means. In this world now, it would be much more direct, but we were trying to work round because none of us had been in a lockdown before. We finished our work. It took us 6 months, short life working group, but it took us 6 months because it's such a complicated area and there were so many discussions involved. And then we had to write a report. And if you've ever got a group of people together to start writing an actual report, my dad's got a phrase that says, you know, that a camel is actually a horse designed by a committee. And it felt a bit like that. We were wanting to go one way, but actually we had to take everybody with us. So it took far too long. I'm really sorry it took us as long as we did, because people's lives, it's not acceptable, and I'm not saying it is, but we've learned and we're absolutely committed. That's one of the reasons Anna keeps saying, remember 2024, that's what the delivery target is, Anna. Yeah, absolutely, 2024. We've got 2 years to get this delivered. That's the challenge we've set ourselves, because it's taken us too long to get to this bit. Okay, so there's a very long-winded explanation. It's never good enough not to involve people, but we did it for the best of reasons and tried to make sure we represented people's views every step of the way. Okay.
Thank you, Charlie. A great question from Edward. And I'm now just, Therese, I think you had a few points maybe to make on that issue as well, just whilst I invite my co-host to come back from the panel.
I was going to ask Tom to probably issue a similar apology as Charlie's did, because I think that's quite good when you hear that it has taken too long. But one thing to give just a bit of optimism, whilst it was taking too long for the group to work on some things, Enable Scotland were getting people out of hospitals. So we were getting phone calls from HSCPs, from NHS saying, can you help support this person? They have chosen Enable and they want to live back in their community. And my eye's going to Howard over there and his team. During the pandemic, at its height, you supported some people who'd had pretty difficult lives because the system had let them down, and supported them to live in their own homes, in their own community, in the middle of a pandemic that none of us had actually been through before. But we kept true to our purpose, and we kept true to the execution of that purpose. And so I probably just want to say thank you to Howard, because there are people today living in their communities that came out of hospital at the height of the pandemic because of the work you and your team did. But Tom, you were part of the group, so you probably have a few thoughts to say.
I mean, absolutely. I think we fully recognise that it did take too long to get to where we are now in terms of the implementation report. And I think if we look back as well, and those of us who've been involved for quite a while, there is a degree of frustration in terms of the length of time from the Mental Welfare Commission report, the initial Coming Home report, and getting to this point with the implementation. But I think Theresa makes a really good point in terms of we've been learning all the way through that, and I think this has been very much at the forefront of our minds in terms of how we can avoid people coming into hospital in the first place. That's really the key here, that we use hospitals for what they're actually designed for, and that's for people to come in for a short period of time, get well and go home again. And through that period, we've been doing some really good work with organisations like Enable and other providers to challenge why it takes so long, what goes wrong, and we've looked to feed all of that into the Coming Home implementation. So the ideas that people are seeing in that about visibility and support across Scotland are really all built up from everybody's experiences. So the people we've worked with over the past few years, but certainly I think people wait far too long for their own front door. But I think what we're hearing today is just a huge commitment around changing that. So thank you.
A huge thank you to all of our panellists this afternoon, and to you for your brilliant questions. Give yourself another round of applause.
This has been a great opportunity to come together and for me to get out of the house and share experience of how we can, don't laugh, how we can shape the world for disabled people going forward in your communities, and you're not alone as well. So thanks for attending. Thanks for attending today's event.
There's a lot to do, isn't there, Michael? And I think we've heard that from the panel there. And every single one of us in this room and watching online, we've all got our part to play from here on in. So thank you for all your contributions. We have collected them all. We're going to round that all up in a post-conference digital report, so that'll be quite exciting and a first for us too. We're really looking forward to working with all of you at Enable over the course of the coming months, and we do have a timeline to make those ambitions now of the Coming Home implementation framework a reality, so that at our next conference, or maybe the one after that in 2024, we can definitely celebrate all that's actually been achieved for many more people with learning disabilities receiving the right-based support that they need in their own homes, close to the people they love. So thank you all for joining us today, and we think it's appropriate now that we let Nova and Sarah close the conference.
Thank you for joining us today at the Enable Scotland Annual Conference. Nova and I hope you have had a great day, meeting friends again after such a long time apart and working together to make a reality our goal to give everyone in Scotland their own front door, just like Nova's. We hope to see you back again next year.